14 months down the road, I've finally found time to create my 12-month review, well, 1 or 2 months between friends, of the Festool, a mobile battery-powered table saw. Now let's deal with one thing straight off the bat. This has not been given to me. I've not been offered this in payment for making the video. I have no connection to Festool whatsoever, apart from being a customer of theirs. In fact, I don't believe they even know this YouTube channel, in the loosest sense of the word, even exists. So I bought this with my own money, and I'll come to a bit later how much it cost me. And secondly, I just want to say that everything in this video is nothing more than my opinion. There'll be some facts and figures in it, but an awful lot of what I think about this as a contender for a table saw in your workshop. So before we start looking at the saw in detail, let me tell you what my purchasing criteria was, and then we can tick them off or not as we go through the video. So the primary reason was a need for an on-site table saw. I'd agreed to make and fit a walk-in wardrobes changing area for a couple in Cornwall. Work that I used to do many years ago. In fact, I did work it out. I stopped doing it at around 1990. Yeah, I know, I'm afraid I'm that old. So when this opportunity came up, I really quite fancied doing it again. Bit of site work, bit of change, get out the workshop. But the job demanded an on-site table saw to make sure it continued at a reasonable pace. So I needed something that was powerful, accurate, highly portable, and something that would store nice and small as possible when I finished the job and I brought it back into the workshop, because I've no intention to sell it on again. If I do that, I'm just going to lose a lot of money. So I looked for a saw that had features on it that would complement what I've already got. Let's have a look at the saw in a bit more detail and see whether I achieved that with this purchase. So let's start with stored size, and this is it. That is the entire table saw with its accessories, excluding batteries and charger, and it all sits in a box, which is superb if you're transporting, which I was. So in the back of the van, stands up, gets strapped to the side of the van, and absolutely solid, can't damage it, nice and protected. Size wise, standard sustainer, 395mm, 300mm give or take, and 500, looks like 511mm. So really compact when not required. That's a tick in one of the boxes. It's pretty weighty. Might hit the microphone here. 15 kilos. You wouldn't want to chuck it around all day, but it's not so heavy as you can't pick it up. Good solid handle at the top. Another bit you can pick up there. Another bit you can pick up there. So yeah, good design, and from Festool's perspective, proven design and interlocks with all of their other cases. This being one of them with the batteries and charger in it, but we'll come to that in a minute. So to access the saw, unclip both ends, lift off the top, and there it is. Inside the lid of the box, you'll find all of the accessories. That's for the riving knife, which is currently in the saw. That's the placeholder for the blade, currently in the saw. That is a dust bag that ships with it. That's your sliding fence, and that's your rip fence. And this is the blade guard, complete with its riving knife, and they simply unclip, clip back in again. This one can be a little bit fussy because you've got to have it set at the exact angle to get back into the moulding. The saw itself is a pretty damn compact unit, as you'd expect coming out of that box. So on the side, we've got the main power button. We've got this lock for your mitre fence, sorry. And then we've got this lock for this sliding table. Yeah, this unit even has a sliding table on it. And this is where the batteries plug in. Come back to those in a minute. And here we've got operator controls. This is to start the saw running, or start the blades spinning, stop the blades spinning. And these are adjustment buttons, which I'll show you more about later. And this is what you use for height and angle adjustment. Over here we've got a flip up extension table, so if I release that and these two arms pop out and support it really well, that's really solid. Pack it back away again, push the two arms in, fold it down, clip it back in place. And if I turn it round again, there's the dust port. You can attach a bag to that or an extractor, and then we're back to the primary on-off button and the battery storage. Now, I was hugely skeptical of this being a battery powered table saw, to the point where I spent an inordinate amount of time looking for alternatives, because I didn't want to have to invest in additional batteries to run a table saw when I've got power sockets all around me for use in the workshop. Running batteries is no benefit to me whatsoever. In fact, it's a hindrance, because you can almost guarantee the batteries are going to run out right when you're in the middle of a job, and then you've got to wait for them to charge, which is a huge inconvenience. But at the time of researching this 14 months ago, I could not find another product that would pack down as small and compact as this in a protected case, and that was as transportable, mobile, with the level of accuracy that this claimed to have. And like you, I watched multiple other videos from other makers on other channels where they'd made a purchase, bought the product, and were wonderfully telling us about their experiences with it. And that helped to drive me to this unit. So far, storage wise, big tick. Transport wise, big tick. Mobility, big tick. Power supply, and that indeed is one of my bugbears with this unit. If they'd have given it a dual power supply, either with a power socket or batteries, I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have gone straight for it. So in order to move on now, I need to power the machine. So let's have a look at the battery solution that comes with it. Or rather, you can buy with it. As per pretty much all Festool kit, you can buy it in various configurations. You can either buy the basic saw without anything else. You can buy the saw and a 2 battery pack and charger, or a 4 battery pack and charger, or you can buy the saw on a trolley which doubles as a table, and yada yada yada. So I bought the version that came with 2 batteries and a charger, but then found out very quickly that if I was having a day where I needed the table saw all day, I had to have 4 batteries, a pair ready to run the machine and a pair on charge. And even then, at times, I feel like I need 2 more, because if you've been running the machine and you've run the batteries low, then the batteries are going to be too warm to charge, and the charger will tell you that. So you've got a period that you need to wait for the batteries to cool, in which time you're already using the other batteries, And then when you put the first set of batteries on charge, they won't be finished by the time you've run out the second set of batteries. So this is the case that the batteries and the charger came in. So it's a double charger. You can get both in at the same time, and it's fairly rapid. I can't remember the exact times to charge the batteries, but the batteries have got to be of a certain age or newer to be able to work in it. And these batteries, as you know, are not cheap. I think these, I managed to get the 2 extra batteries for about £100 each. And you've also got the issue of where do you keep the charger and the box and the batteries in the workshop. So let's take 2 of these out and power it up. So as mentioned before, this is your main power button to initiate the user controls. Then you've got a couple of seconds while it initializes, and then you're ready to roll. So as you've seen, this unit is as it came out the box. So the blade is in storage mode, withdrawn below the surface of the saw, which means to use it I need to raise the blade. Now this is where the digital control becomes I think a pain in the ass. So to get the blade up, I need to press the button and turn the dial, as opposed to manual saws where you just wind it. But it's now ready to roll. I should also mention that you've got to reverse that before you turn it off and put it away. I forgot to do that I don't know how many times, which is a bit of a nuisance, having to turn it back on again, wait for it to initialize, lower the blade and then turn it off again. So the only other thing we need before we can make a rip cut is the rip fence, which slides into this channel and locks down like so. The scale on the side of the saw can be adjusted easily with these 2 torque screws. Undo them, line it up when you do your initial calibration, and then tighten it down again. It was almost bang on out of the box, just not quite. In order to stow the fence, this is the position that it needs to be in, and I'd really like that down a lot across this gauge a little more, the ruler, so it's easier for me to see. So as something else to do is to slide that down. You may like it up there. I prefer it about there. Again, no big deal, just a little something to remember. Once the fence is locked in place, there is very little, if no deflection on it at all. It's really solid. And while we're talking about the fence, it's also possible for you to, using that same locking knob, slide the fence out, turn it around, pop it back in again, and then we can make angled cuts without fear of cutting into the fence on smaller pieces. So let's power the saw on and see how loud it is. So first thing, just to get a feel for the noise it makes, I don't have a decibel meter, so you'll be able to hear it in comparison to the spoken voice on the video. I think it's really quite quiet, so we'll see what it sounds like without anything going through it, and then I'll run this piece of maple through, which is about 35mm, and we'll run that through first of all with just the dust bag on the back, so you'll be able to see what sort of dust it generates, how effective its internal mechanism is at keeping the dust down. And then after that I'll run the same piece through again with dust extraction, one of Festool's dust extractors connected, and again you'll be able to see how effective that is. So when I turn the saw on, bear in mind that the microphone is on my shirt, so I'm pretty much as close to it as you'd want to get. that's it. That's all the noise it makes. I think that's pretty impressive. Nice and quiet on the job site, and of course in the workshop. So let's set that for a bit of a clean up cut. So we're just inside. So it is a closed cut because there'll be timber each side. And I'm going to use the included push stick, which is here on the back of the fence. So here we go. So it's pretty damn effective. Not an awful lot came out. So now I'll take the dust bag off and connect up an extractor, which I'll turn on manually because I don't have blue teeth. So from a noise perspective, superb, really quiet, really pleased with that. Power, I didn't go easy on the saw, I just pushed the timber through at a rate I'd expect the saw to be able to cope with. And it does, as you could hear by the sound that the motor was making. It wasn't labouring, it wasn't struggling. And as I said, that's a 35mm thick piece of maple. So I think a pretty reasonable test. So now let's look at the crosscut capability. First thing I'm going to do is pop out the extension table, move the fence out the way, and then I'm going to slide in the crosscut fence. So I'm going to unlock this little lever, slide that into roughly where I think I want it to. Bit there, and lock that off, and then I'm going to unlock the slide-in table. And the action on that is absolutely smooth as silk. So on the fence itself, we can go from 70 degrees one side to a full 70 degrees the other. So we've got one hell of a range, and we've also got a little bit of adjustment available here if we need to tweak it a bit, if we've given it a prang or it's gone off. And the fence itself can slide, so we can get that nicely up to the blade, not too close, so we can support our piece. And we're ready to cross cut. So I'll turn the main power on to the saw, wait for it to initialize. Then I've got a little piece of oak here, which is 38mm, 39mm by 90. So I'll adjust that up to 41. And then I'll trim a little bit off the end. Well, I've got it in this configuration. It's an ideal opportunity for me to show you the angle cut. So if I press this button, this allows me to alter the angle. Now this bit I really like, and you can dial it in even more if you want to. By pressing and holding the button. So let's go 22.5. Beautiful. And again, as you heard, the motor's not labouring at all. It's got more than enough power to deal with cuts through a reasonable sized piece of oak. So let's talk capacities on this little saw. Max rip width. The scale goes up to 28 centimeters. You could... you can't really push that. That is about your max, because the little binding clip will be outside. You could rig up a little something, but you're looking at about 28 centimeters. Max cutting height is 50.8 mil, apparently. 50 mil, I would have said. Max depth on the sliding table, that's where the lock is. I think, being reasonable, that would be the furthest position you could set that to. So you could get, that's at max height, 430 mil as the max width of your piece. And we look at maximum angle you can cut. So we got a max of 45 degrees this way toward the fence, and the height is currently showing 36.8. So max height of cut at max angle of cut, if you follow that, 36.8. So all in all, for such a tiny saw, capacities are pretty reasonable, I think. So on to the juicy bit. What did it cost me? So the package I bought was the table saw itself, 2 batteries and the battery charger, and the mobile trolley slash work table, workbench for it, which is actually rather cool. Makes transferring it to and fro the job site really easy, arguably not needed in the workshop. That package cost me £2,299. That's a lot of money, which needs an awful lot of justification, in my opinion. If it's worth it or not, you're the only people that can answer that question for yourselves. You've just got to look at what's on the market and decide whether you want to go this route or you want to go the Bosch or the Makita or the DeWalt, all of which are perfectly good table saws. I decided to go for this one because I was swayed by the really compact size when it's stowed away and not in use. So I hope this video has been useful for you and has answered some questions if you're considering buying one of these for yourself. If you liked it, then give us a thumbs up. If you like what I do here on the channel, then give us a subscribe. I'd be very grateful indeed. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Ta-ra.